the time I almost pooped my pants in the Utah desert. This happened a while ago, but I still think about it. I moved to the Utah desert in my early 20s to work as a wilderness therapy trail staff. It was a nomadic, primitive living program, so no base camps or modern comforts. We carried everything on our backs, relying on handmade packs, tarps, and whatever we could physically manage over 5 to 15-mile hikes across brutal terrain. We were in the middle of nowhere backcountry, nothing for miles, just under 3,000 square miles. We even had to gather supplies for our own bow drill kits to start fires. Some of us had hand drill kits too, but the blisters were never worth it. Shifts lasted anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and we were responsible for the campers 24/7. One of our duties was the 3 a.m. spot check. Every night, one staff member had to wake up, physically confirm every camper was accounted for, and send a GPS ping to the office as a safety check. If the check was missed, the office was supposed to call at 4:30 a.m., but they never did, figures. It was not a favorable position to be in, so I always volunteered. You would physically have to get up, out of your sleeping bag, and walk around to ensure every head was counted. No one wanted this job, but it was an extra $5 a day on your paychecks that really added up. The staff were a really tight-knit group of dinguses, and we all loved each other. We would divide tasks fairly between staff in a group. We were all close, and I was especially close with our direct supervisor, Jay. This will be useful later on. It was midwinter when I got assigned to the adult group. The only 18-plus camp in the program also happened to be co-ed. This meant some special requirements, like separate boys and girls camps a specific distance from our main camp. My friend Dave and I were stoked to be paired up with the adults, as that meant less drama and more freedom to do cool things, like challenging hikes. We planned a route to a remote, technicolored hill deep in a red sand pit. It would be a perfect campsite with tree cover and enough space to separate the boys and girls camps. After a week of hiking, we arrived. The nearest service road, and I'm talking backcountry, barely a road kind of road, was half a mile away and approached the hill from one direction. It was a one-way in, one-way out situation for driving in supplies for the weekend. The company's transport vehicles would bring our food and water over this weekend. That night, after setting up camp, Dave and I stayed up late with a few campers, making a terrible attempt at wilderness desserts. Once the campers went to bed, we planned for the next day, put out the fire, and turned in. Then came 3 a.m. When I woke up for my spot check, something felt off. The camp wasn't just quiet, it was dead silent. No wind, no distant coyotes, no rustling trees, or even the sounds of scavengers searching for crumbs from our dinner in the sump. Just an unnatural, suffocating stillness. Snow fell in slow motion, the stars reflecting off each flake. I didn't need a light because the soft white blanket was illuminated with a celestial glow. I started my midnight check. The girls' camp was intact, all 4 campers asleep where they should be. Then I walked the 150 yards towards base camp, only hearing my own breath and the sound of my chacos crunching the snow. Once in base camp, I bent down to check the fire pit. The coals were buried under ash and fresh snow, but I moved a small patch aside and saw them still glowing, which would make morning fire prep easier. Then I heard it, a man's voice, calling my name. It came from the boys' camp. The voice was deep, carrying through the silence. My mind raced to place it. Not one of the campers. Not Dave. I figured Dave was messing with me. People thought I wasn't scared of anything, which wasn't true. I just looked like I wasn't. But I headed toward the voice anyway, convinced it was a joke. At the boys' camp, I went straight to Dave's shelter to call his bluff. I shook his shoulder, no response. I climbed into his shelter and pressed a hand to his carotid artery, just to be sure he wasn't dead. He had a palpable pulse, but no movement. His thoracic cavity was barely moving from his breath. This was the same guy who would wake up at a twig snapping, who snored like a chainsaw, Yet now he was utterly silent. I even tried a sternum rub. Nothing. Uneasy, I checked the 4 male campers, all accounted for, all asleep, all breathing. Then, from beyond the campsite, my name. Again. The voice came from down the hill. The only way out was the far more distant service road behind us. Whatever was calling me wasn't standing on a road. It wasn't supposed to be there. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my earlobes, and my butthole felt like it was in my throat. The snow kept falling, weightless. Time felt sluggish. Then one last time, my name again from behind the tree line. It was louder now, closer. I felt a slight wave of relief when I remembered Jay was on shift. I pulled out the inReach and sent Jay a message. "Hey, are you here? Come say hi." If he was messing with me, he'd own up to it quickly with a, you got me. But no reply came. I power walked back to my shelter, buried myself in my sleeping bag, and clenched my eyes shut. As the first hints of daylight softened the sky, I finally slipped into sleep. A few hours later, I woke up. No one was awake yet, so I collected my store of dry firewood I had hidden in my shelter the night before and went off to start the morning fire. About half an hour later, Dave emerged from the trees, rubbing his eyes and pulling on his jacket. He sat in silence for a long time, and I had assumed he was contemplating breakfast. Finally, he piped up. "No, but boy, do I have a story. You first or me?" So I told him everything. The silence, the falling snow, his of a body, the voice calling my name again and again from the dark. He listened, wide-eyed. "In my dream, the group woke up, but we couldn't find you. We called Jay, and he came with search and rescue. All they found was a trail of deer prints leading from your shelter into the woods, but that was it." We sat there, stunned. Me still processing what he had said in my slightly sleep-deprived, delirious state. We were quiet until the first camper came out and sat with us, and I checked my inReach. Jay had finally responded. He wasn't anywhere near us. He was back in town at the office all night. The campers woke, and we got on with our day, pushing the unease aside. The rest of the shift was uneventful, which is always good in the wilderness. The director of the program even showed up once to have dinner with us and play some games. It was one of the better shifts I remember being out there. When shift change arrived, we said our goodbyes, but before I left, one of the campers pulled me aside. "I'm really glad you didn't go missing. I had a weird dream one night that first week. I woke up and saw you walking into the woods. I tried to scream for you, but I couldn't make a sound. There was a strange man calling your name." That last stretch before transport felt endless. I've worked many shifts since then, but I've never been closer to shitting my pants in my adult life. Once I got back to the office, I noticed that the director of the program had left me a note in my cubby. I guess Dave spoke with him the day he came to visit and told him about his dream and my spooky situation. The director was notorious for being highly superstitious and had left me a little pathway mantra tied to a necklace made of hollowed-out juniper seed called ghost beads. This was one of the many unexplained situations out in the desert that I encountered, but nothing so far has kept me from spending as much time as I can sleeping under the stars. My aunt's house is haunted. My aunt's house is haunted. She had stuff happen to her almost all her life. The paranormal activities usually center around her, but many of the family members, it's a big joint family, even guests, had their fair share of encounters with whatever resided in their house. I've only ever visited their house during some family functions or other festivities, so usually it was full house with lots of hustle and bustle, so I myself never had any first-hand experience there, but I'd like to share some stories about it. This happened 10 or so years ago. The bed in my aunt's room was pushed against a wall. She slept at the wall side while my uncle took the open side. Whenever she needed to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, she'd have to cross Uncle's sleeping form to climb down the bed. Both of them were quite tall and large in size, so you can imagine the whole ordeal had a bit of fanfare to it. One night my uncle woke up to my aunt slipping past him and climbed down the bed shaking a little and everything. It was dark, so he couldn't make out much and was ready to fall back asleep. Only he remembered that my aunt wasn't even there to begin with. She had come to visit our family and stayed with us for a couple of days. My uncle was sleeping alone on the bed. As soon as he realized the fact, he quickly sat up in panic and turned on the bedside lamp. There, in the middle of the room, he saw someone standing, their whole body covered in a thick layer of body hair that looked more like fur on a bear. And the thing, the entity, looked over their shoulder towards my uncle. They had the exact face as my aunt. They smiled at my uncle wearing my aunt's face and then ran out of the room. Shaken to the core, my uncle gave chase. He had no idea what or who he was seeing, but when he made it to the living room, the thing was gone entirely. 2 months later, a maid who used to work for my aunt in the past came to pay them a visit, exchanged some pleasantries and so on. They were all talking, and eventually the fact that my uncle had seen a furry spirit came up in the conversation. Hearing the story, the maid started to shake in fear. She grabbed my aunt and confessed that she had also seen a similar thing when she was working for them. They have an outdoor kitchen and a conjoined area for washing and cleaning with a well. One night, after a very late dinner, the maid was washing all the dishes near the well. Every other member of the family had gone back to their own rooms at that point. It was a cold night and she was all alone. Suddenly she felt someone was there. When she looked over, she saw a figure covered in fur from shoulder to feet, but its face was exactly like my aunt's. She was so scared, she ran back to the house. And it was apparently the whole reason she quit her job at their house in the first place. She never told anyone because she thought no one would believe her. This is the scariest thing I've ever heard, and it spooks me every time I remember. There's actually a third encounter with the same entity and same site, but maybe that's a story for next time. Sleep paralysis demon licked me in the ear. I live in Georgia now, moved out here 4 years ago from Texas. I've had sleep paralysis on and off my whole life since I was a kid. Never actually seeing any figures, but just knowing it's there. I took a trip with some friends to a men's retreat on the side of this mountain in North Carolina when I first got here. It was hard adjusting, moving across the country. It was the first time I've ever done something like that. So I was under quite a bit of stress emotionally, trying to get my footing in a new environment. The first night we were there, I walk into my cabin with a bunch of different guys I've never met. There was no AC and it was the dead of summer, so we were all sweating our balls off. Everyone's laying down and I'm on the top bunk. One of my close friends is beneath me dead asleep. I fall asleep to the sound of the box fan on the ground. Come 3 a.m. I wake up but can't move. The box fan is making this warped whooshing sound, and I knew what it was. I was paralyzed. My eyes are open, the room is dark, and out of the peripheral of my eye I see someone standing there looking directly at me, an extremely dark figure. He's speaking in some foreign language at me. I had never felt more terrified, and for some reason I could see his tongue coming out of his pitch-black face. I don't know how to say this, or how to describe how it felt, but I could literally feel this long, demonic language-speaking tongue go into my ear, as if to terrorize me by saying it could do whatever it wanted with me. Because I have dealt with sleep paralysis on and off my entire life, I've learned a few things to combat it when I feel it on set. 1. Don't fight it. 2. Internally say the name Jesus, because as we all know, you can't speak when you're under the spell of paralysis. 3. Wait. I'm not on here trying to evangelize anyone. This shit was scary. But for some reason, the name of Jesus always loosens the grip of the paralysis, even if you can't audibly speak his name. Anyways, the best advice I can give to anyone is if you feel it coming on while you're asleep, do not fight it. It only makes it stronger.